Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way. I'm kind of going to do something a little different that I've done in the past because for this one, I'm going to switch up the format. And the format will be me just exploring and sharing some things that I found in this past week because a lot of things I find, maybe it's a quote or an article or a story or whatever it is, a lot of the things that I find usually have some type of way of connecting and meshing together into something that's, I think, pretty unique. And so today, I'm just going to run through a couple things that I found. And the first thing I'm going to share is a parable or a story. And I love stories, especially parables, because they're this way of conveying these really deep philosophical ideas in the forms of stories. And I love stories because there's just amazing ways to connect. And people always remember stories. People won't remember like numbers or stats. They'll remember stories. So this one kind of has two parables, both taught by Buddha, because I learned a bit about Buddhism this week, and both relating to arrows. Now, this first one, well, first of all, if you don't know who Buddha is or like the original teachings of Buddhism, to be super honest and transparent, like I don't either. Especially because like growing up in America, we really aren't taught these things super deeply. From what I do know and like the original founding story of it, I'll take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But basically, you have this prince, and this prince, he's growing up, and his father doesn't want him to see all of the real of the world. Like, he doesn't want the kid to see death or sickness or old aging. And so what the father does, he goes through these crazy lengths of like removing any of the ugly people who are serving him or removing any of the old people who are serving him. So literally this prince growing up, all he knows is like perfection. And there's one day where the prince, he goes out into the real world on like some trip or something, but he goes out into the real world, and for the first time in his entire life, his entire world just completely shatters. And if you can think about this, it's like me being put in a box my whole life. I'm like living in one room, and for the longest time, for like maybe even like 20 years, all I know is that one box. And that's what I believe the world to be, is this box. And then for the first time, you break down a wall in that box, and you see the sunrise and you see the sunset. But not only that, you see the tough parts of life. And that's what the prince saw. The prince went out for the first time in his entire life. He saw sickness and aging and even death. And he was completely mortified. Like, what the heck? This is nothing I ever thought was possible. Why is this even happening? And then it like roller coasters into this whole way of life, this way of thinking, new religion called Buddhism. But in that, Buddha, he teaches these two parables, both relating to arrows. And the first one I want to share is called the parable of the poisoned arrow. Now I'm going to share the story and then give some context and the big takeaways. But the parable of the poisoned arrow, say for example, you have this guy in the village, and this guy, he gets shot in the back. And he gets shot in the back with a poisoned arrow. And while this arrow is in his back and he's being poisoned, instead of going and seeking aid from like the doctor and getting the medicine that he needs, he instead is like, whoa, I gotta figure this out. I gotta know what type of arrows in my back, what type of poison they use, who shot the arrow, at what distance he shot it from, the kind of arrow he used, the kind of bow he used, where he's from, who his family members is, why he shot the arrow in the first place. Like, he lists all of these different things that he wants to know about the person who shot him with the arrow, and every little detail about everything that happened to lead to that. And as he's like asking these questions and like, I need an answer, I need an answer, he passes away because he never took care of the pressing issue of the thing that actually matters, which is the arrow in his back that is poisoning him right now. Now, the context of this question is the person who asks it, I don't know the full story or the full details behind it, but the person who asks is like asking all these deep, metaphysical, philosophical questions that honestly have no pragmatic meaning in their lives. And I threw a whole bunch of big words out there. I honestly fully don't know what they mean, but what I do know is that the point of this story is that we have all these questions in the back of our mind. We have all these things going on. But the pressing thing is, what are you going to do? The pressing thing is, how are you going to get out of it? Like, we can have all these questions of, oh my goodness, I'm so worried that this is going to fail, or I'm so worried that how people are going to think of me, and all of these things that come to our mind, or even like the deep philosophical questions of, what happens to an ant when it dies? Does it go to heaven or hell? Those types of questions. I mean, sometimes in life, we just gotta push forward and we just gotta act. And it's those questions and us like telling ourselves, I need an answer. I need to answer those questions. When really, for some things, you just gotta act. Just gotta go forward. And the deeper question is, what are you gonna do now? This gets into another parable that he taught, is this parable of the two arrows. And the way this one goes is, Buddha teaches this. He says, the first arrow, or he asks a question. He says, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? And the person answers the question, oh yeah, of course. Of course it's painful. And then he asks another question. He says, if a person is struck again with a second arrow, is it even more painful? And then the person answers her and he says, yeah. And Buddha's big lesson, the big takeaway was, in life, we cannot always control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first. The second arrow is option. Now, this is something that honestly I try to live by. And it gets really, really dark, really, really quick too. Because the first arrow, it can be something silly like waking up late or getting a bad grade on your test. But honestly, it can get like really, really tough. Losing your job and not knowing how to provide, going through some health problems and not knowing whether you're going to make it out, or even losing someone that you really, really love. Because that is the first arrow. The first arrow is when life punches us right in the face and says, what are you going to do about it? And our reaction, our response, that's the second arrow. And then we got to legit ask ourselves, okay, what am I going to do now? Am I going to let the first arrow weigh me down and poison me and let it stay there? Or am I going to get the help I need? I'm going to take the arrow out of my back and keep moving forward and use it as a learning experience or a time to be grateful. That's the parable part, the stories that I wanted to share. They were kind of two, but like kind of correlated. So we'll call it one big story with the overarching takeaway of, what are you going to do now? Something that I have been doing lately is I've been reading a whole bunch of Nassim Taleb books. This guy is like a philosopher who has a really cool story, actually. He grew up in Lebanon during the wars, and so he for real went through it. But out of there, he went to like war in and then moved on to trading and made a whole bunch of money in Wall Street. And then from there, he left it because it wasn't really for him. Like all these things, but he has some incredible teachings in his books. Because he's a philosopher. And so, I mean, literally his full-time job basically is just thinking, like deep, deep thinking. And so I've been on this huge Nassim Taleb kick of reading all his books. And the two that I'm really, really interested right now is Black Swan and Antifragile. And I'll definitely talk more about that in the future, but those are two amazing books. And I'm still trying to learn and take away as much as I can out of just Black Swan because oh my goodness, it goes deep into all these philosophical things, and I'm pulling out and making connections between all the different things that I've been going on in my life and different things that I've learned. So it's been super cool to do that. An article that I really, really loved is about like decision making, because I think making decisions, it's super tough. Like honestly, especially those tough decisions, like where am I going to go to school? What career path am I going to go down? All those questions that eventually we have to go through. But with making those decisions, there's these mental models that we can use, these tools that we can use. Say, okay, because of this tool, I'm going to use this. I'm going to pick this decision. Or it's really more like, think of it like glasses. Like when you put on a different set of glasses, it'll help you see things just a little bit different so that you know which path to take, which decision to go down on. For example, one of the mental models that I love using is this question, this dominant question of what's the value? What's the value? And I talked about this in the last episode. What is the value and how does this get me closer to my dream identity? But the article that I'm talking about is called Reversible and Irreversible Decisions, posted by Farnham Street. Basically talks about how when you're making decisions, you got to think about whether they're reversible or irreversible. Now, it's not either or, it's more like a spectrum. Where does it fall in the spectrum of reversible or irreversible? Like, for example, something like, I'm going to go to this college. It's closer to irreversible, but it's not completely irreversible because you could transfer, choose something else, or as opposed to something that's super reversible, like, what am I going to eat this morning? What am I going to eat for breakfast? Because if you don't like it, then you could just put it down and eat something different the next day. But the big takeaway out of this article, this big mental model, was make reversible decisions as soon as possible and irreversible decisions as late as possible. Because I would totally agree with this idea of what's the value, like failing forward. But this is something that I completely overlooked. Like the fact that some decisions are way harder to reverse than others. And with those decisions, it's probably better to make those as late as possible and try to gain as much information. Like something I'm thinking about, especially right now, is we're trying to buy a company. And with buying a company, that is a super irreversible decision. Like it is super tough when you put millions and millions of dollars into this thing. Not only that, you're going to put years and years of effort and time and energy and staying up late at night into buying this company. That is a pretty irreversible decision. And so right now we're in what's called the diligence phase, or we have this company under LOI. We have 90 days to really think through, is this actually a company we want to buy? And it goes with this idea of making that decision as late as possible, as opposed to something like reaching out to a company. Because reaching out to a company is like super easy. All you got to do is send an email. And that's a really reversible decision because at that point, if you decide, okay, this company is kind of off, I don't really want to buy this business, then you could just stop and cut it off right there. Pretty reversible, as opposed to like, okay, going through with the deal, putting down millions and millions of dollars and saying, okay, I'm the CEO of this company now. And then later realizing, oh, dang, this isn't that reversible. And the way they kind of explain this is this idea of doors. When they're going through and trying to make a decision, is it a one-way door or a two-way door? Can you go in, take a look, and then walk out? Or do you have to go in and stay there and then start looking around and be like, yeah, what are you going to do now? The quote I found is from this book called A Grief Observed, and it's by this guy, C.S. Lewis. He's a super big Christian apologist who was atheist for a long while, and then he converted, and then now he's like a super devout Christian. And he's the one who's super famous for Narnia, talking about, I believe it's called The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Sorry if I messed that one up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Super big author, super big writer. But his story is really, really powerful because he eventually found this woman that he really loved. The thing about this woman is that not only was she a mother, he had two kids. And so if he did marry her, he would have to, not have to, like it's a bad thing, but it's something to consider is that he would be a stepfather to these children. But the other thing is that she had cancer. And so he loved this woman a lot. And despite the fact that she had cancer and this is something that they were going to have to work through and deal with together, he went through and married her. And then down the road, her cancer went into remission. And so he celebrated and they had this blissful marriage for a couple years, super joyful, super loving. And then all of a sudden, the cancer comes back. Life punches both of them in the face and the sons and takes her away. And so the first arrow hits, this poisonous arrow, this irreversible thing that has happened. Now, what are you going to do about it? And so as C.S. Lewis, as he's going through all of this pain and emotion and anger and frustration and fear and all the things going through his mind, he writes this book to convey his feeling. And it's called A Grief Observed. And there's this quote out of there that I really, really loved. It says, "It is easy to say you believe a rope to be strong and sound as long as you are merely using it to cord a box. But suppose you had to hang by that rope over a precipice. Wouldn't you then discover how much you really trusted it?" And when I heard this quote, oh my goodness, it hit home. Like chills went down my spine because I absolutely love that idea of it's easy when it's easy. It's so easy to say, I love you, or I have faith in you, or I believe you when things are going well. What's way harder than that is when things aren't going well. And so for him, he can say, oh yeah, I love you, God. I have faith in you, God. It's so easy for him to say that when he's in this blissful marriage and he has a wife and he has these children that he's looking after. But it's when he's dangling off the precipice from that rope of faith that you really get to see, okay, is it strong? Is it going to hold up? What's going to happen now? And this whole book is filled with legit concerns and worries. Like literally the opening is talking about fear. He's like, I didn't know grieving was synonymous, so similar to fear. And he really dives deep into this question, into this struggle of how do you cope with this? But the biggest takeaway, honestly, from especially this quote is that it's through those tough times that truly build who you are and your character as a person. And not even you, but like, I'm talking about me. Like, it is those tough times of losing someone that I love and asking myself, okay, that first hero hit, what am I going to do now that I'm hanging by this rope on this thing of faith, on this thing of my mission? What am I going to do now? And now the last thing I wanted to share that I found is this podcast episode. Now, it doesn't really connect too well with everything that I've been this theme of what are you gonna do now? But it was a super good episode, so I wanted to share it with Ali Abdul, and he does this thing. He's like a big productivity YouTuber guy, but he interviewed this guy, Cliff Weitzman is his name. And Cliff, he is an immigrant. He was born, I believe, in the Middle East, and he comes over to America and he can't read. He's dyslexic. And growing up, especially in his immigrant family, especially with his super motivated brothers and sisters and parents, his brothers that go on to like these top-notch schools and learning a whole bunch. And here he is, the guy who can't read. And growing up, he thought it was like an issue with him, and his parents were like, why can't you read? Why can't you read? Eventually, he finds out because he has dyslexia. And so from that, he engineers and builds this thing that can help him, quote unquote, read. And so it's this text to speech thing where instead of reading the words, he just listens to it. And it's a super cool story. Like, I could go super deep on it. I kind of already have, but listen to the episode because he has a really, really unique story, and some of the views that he has on life, I think is really cool. The biggest actionable advice and takeaway that I got from it, because he built this company that does AI text to speech where you can like throw in an article or throw in a book, and it'll give you the sound of like Snoop Dogg reading it, which I thought was pretty sick. But his big piece of advice at the very end was learn how to listen fast. This skill of speed listening, it'll help you a bunch. And that's exactly what I use to even learn about all these different things, because I speed listen, but I also like read while I'm listening. And so that helps me like highlight stuff that I really love and resonate with me, and also get through a lot more material faster. But speed listening is like it's like speed learn, like put more information into your brain and then you train your brain to distill that information and pick out the parts that are super applicable to you and hopefully find ways to apply it to your life. And so that's the skill. Be listening. Check out the full episode to hear his whole story and his ways of looking about life. I think it's pretty old, but it's still really good. But yeah, that's all for I guess you call that like the weekly wrap up. Different things that I found throughout the week that I thought were pretty good, and I'll put that together. I'll put it into like a blog post style Notion page thing and put that on the website or description, wherever it's possible. But I think it'll be cool for me to look back at like 10 years from now, see the different things I was up to. And also, like, one of the things that I'm learning right now in Black Swan is how Nassim Taleb, he loves this idea of history, because it's so easy when I'm like 10 years from now looking back at this experience of being in college, doing a startup, going for internships, all these different things I'm doing. It's super easy to look back at it and say, oh, yeah, it's super easy. I had an easy time. All I did was this, and then I did this. And everything sort of just connected, like everything just fit. When in reality, I am like living history right now. I'm creating it. And so for me to be documenting this journey and 10 years from now looking back and be like, oh dang, I did not have anything figured out. I could like for real, like I'm still trying to figure this stuff out of internships and startup stuff and figuring out how the startup is gonna work. And bro, I honestly still trying to figure out life. So that's just an update on like legacy voyage stuff. But to go to my life update, first of all, update on myself. Things have honestly been amazing. Like this past weekend, went to Orlando, and usually a trip or traveling flights, it does a couple things to my health. First, of course, it like completely destroys it because of sleep. That's the first thing. Because time zones and routines are all thrown off. The other thing it does is food. Because when you travel, it's usually like one or the other. You either have way too much food because mom cooked too much, or you don't have enough food because you're traveling and not trying to spend like $1,000 on fast food every single day. But the Sasha was super good because I was able to with it, like sit with the hunger. And although that might come off weird, but I thought it was really good skill to have of being able to sit with it. This feeling of, okay, I can be hungry. It doesn't mean that I have to eat. The same way I can be scared, I can be afraid. Doesn't mean I have to sit still and not do anything. I can feel this feeling of fear, and still feeling that fear, I can go against it. I can act, because courage is not the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And this idea of discipline is not the absence of temptation, but acting in spite of it. But that was really good for me. And also on top of all of that, like really feeling out myself, listening to my body, being like, okay, am I hungry? No, so I'm not gonna. And I've just felt huge amounts of, like, now that my diet has been honestly the best it's been in ages, definitely feeling that, like, mentally and physically for sure. So that's been amazing. In terms of my people, the other aspect of my life, I would say with family, I mean, it was amazing being able to go to Orlando. That was awesome. But one of the reasons why this episode and really this whole week talks so much about what are you going to do now and the first arrow and grieving after a loved one. The reason it was after all that stuff, because although I personally didn't lose someone who I was super, super close with and talk days on days with this person, I did lose someone. And it really hits you in the mouth. Like life really punches you in the face when you lose someone close to you, because in that, it's a wake up call. It's like, okay, what are you doing? Why are you here in the first place? All these deep questions that come back while you're trying to process all of these emotions of losing a loved one. But through all of that, and I'll probably share this story down the road when I'm ready, but like in the past, I've lost someone who was super close to me. And honestly, whenever I think back to that person, really the only thing I can be is grateful. Like, I'm just so grateful that that person was in my life to begin with. Because by no means did that person have to come into my life at all. But that person did come into my life. And because of that, I am so, so grateful. That's a story for another time for future episode. Man, this one is kind of emotional. This one's kind of getting me tearing up over here. But moving on to update on my work. A bunch of things are cooking up, man. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the last episode, but I got accepted to this Deloitte program for consulting. But not only one, two programs that they do. And it's kind of interesting because they recruit directly out of Northwestern. So I kind of have like a leg up in terms of that, but also my philosophy and Tongan background. I'm like, oh, there you go. And business and interest and all that type of stuff. But got accepted into these two Deloitte programs. Deloitte is like a big consulting firm. It's known as like one of the big four, which I completely understand if you don't know what that is. Because honestly, before I even applied, I didn't know what that is. I only learned it after I applied. I was like, oh, it's one of the big four. But that'll be a whole other experience. Oh my goodness, I can't wait for that. Because honestly, I have not explored this consulting world at all. And so that'll be a good intro into this whole world. Outside of that, I mentioned, I think in the last episode, about niche news and focusing on this business director idea. I think I've honestly been over engineering my whole ideas and thought process behind it. Tomorrow, I'm committing myself. Tomorrow, I'm going to make the LinkedIn post, create the Google Sheet, and do the first reach outs for people to join the directory. Google Sheets, Google Form, because I low key can get it done in like 2 or 3 hours. I've just been putting it off because I've been putting this amount of pressure and weight on myself, which is low key against, now that I'm saying it out loud, it's against the values of failing forward. So I'm going to run with that tomorrow. The other thing is with the internship, succession. I mean, I definitely feel like I haven't been showing up the way that I would want to as an A player at a firm that I'm at. So depending on how that goes, like it's tough trying to split my time between all these different activities, all these different projects. So we'll see how things turn out if I stay with him or not going into this next quarter. Let's see what else is in the works. No, I think those are the biggest announcements. And then, of course, with Legacy Voids, like I mentioned, trying to update this and put it in a format that I can really spend some time in to think. Because one of the other things that I'm finding is that I really enjoy reading books and drawing these connections between all these philosophical ideas that I've come over. And maybe if they're not even philosophical, like just something that I've stumbled upon, like this growth mindset idea and how that connects to the idea of specialization in work and how we don't necessarily think, oh, I'm born to do business or I'm born to be in healthcare or all these different things. But now I'm just rambling. I'm gonna slow it down. I've really enjoyed this episode because it's been a way for me to distill my thoughts into a way that is super honest and vulnerable, but at the same time hopefully provide value, while at the same time being a way for me to look back at my journey and recording history in the making, which is what this is. It's me recording my history, my legacy of who I'm becoming, which I'll probably dive deeper into next episode, is this idea of legacy. Because I've been thinking about that a lot. At the start of this episode, my whole idea of legacy, all that was like massive impact, become a billionaire, super successful, boom, that's my legacy. I'm passing that on. Now my idea of legacy has shifted and changed over the years. And really the whole point of this podcast has kind of shifted and changed. So we'll talk more about that in the next one. But would love to hear thoughts, opinions, what people think about this new layout, this new update. But looking forward to the next one. I'll see you there. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.